guest is Art Greenbaum.
Hi, Lynn. It's nice to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Well, thanks for coming, Art. And you've been on the show before where you were telling people about the offerings at Sportsman's and the facility and so forth with Dan Rosenkowski.
Right.
And but we're going to have you back this time as to tell us a little bit about yourself more. Just focus on that and what brought you to Brattleboro and things like that.
Well,
so tell us about yourself.
Well, my wife and I, Susan, used to ski here in the mid-'60s, and when I finished my apprenticeship and my associate's degree, we elected to move to Brattleboro to raise our family. We have 2 daughters. They live in the northern part of the state, a couple grandkids. We moved to Brattleboro primarily because of the easy access to 91 to get to the cities, to see our family. And we felt that Brattleboro was a good jump-off point in southern Vermont to become Vermonters and live technically the dream of being in New England.
Uh-huh. And what town, where were you born and where did you grow up?
I was basically raised on Long Island. My wife was raised in Southern California. We met in high school. She was a junior, I was a sophomore.
You met, her family had moved to New York?
That is correct, yeah. We met in high school, we dated. After high school, we married shortly thereafter, and then had our first daughter, Corey, who was born at Bayshore Hospital in 1971. Then moved to Vermont shortly thereafter, and then had our second daughter, Carrie, who was born here at BMH.
Mm-hmm. So there is a dream to want to be in Vermont. That was part of the mystique?
Oh, I think absolutely. When you look at New England and then you actually look at Vermont, I think that there's this dream that a lot of us share, that it's a way of life that is more rewarding other than financial gain.
Uh-huh. But you've had good financial success in Brattleboro. And so let's talk about how, when you came here, did we have 2 nickels to rub together? Because most of us came and didn't.
No, I don't think I had 2 nickels to rub together. In fact, when we came here, we moved to Brattleboro in September of '71. I rented a house here in town. Actually, it was across the street from where we live presently still, living in Hillwinds for the last almost 40 years this September. We had all our possessions packed in about a 15-foot moving van and a pickup truck and a trailer, and we moved up. We rented a house while I built the house that we live in now, and completed that in the middle of January, and then said to my wife, okay, I'm going out to find a job. I left that morning about 5 a.m., called her about 7:30 p.m. and said I found a job. I'm working for a company out of Connecticut, and I'll be working in construction in Smith College, and then from there it went to Greenfield Community College. Then from there it went to Putnam Memorial Hospital, which is in Bennington, which is a new version of the same location. That lasted for about 2.5 to 3 years, and then the Arab oil embargoes came, and we were paying, gas rationing was happening, and there was a recession that was being forecasted. We were coming off of the war economy, and I turned around and, at the advice of my close worker, who was my boss also, he said, I can get you on in Boston if you want. So for almost 2 years I commuted daily from Brattleboro to Boston, worked on the Shawmut building, which was a 40-story high-rise for the company that I was working for in Connecticut. So I was in Boston for about 2 years, and then that project wound down in late November of '74. Turned around and we decided to take a vacation, so we took a couple weeks off, and just as I was leaving to go on vacation, I received a phone call and said I could get a job in Connecticut again. So my wife said, let's go on vacation. So we went on vacation, and I came back, and then my old boss called me up and said, hey, I got good news for you. Now this is during the recession of 1975. He said, I got good news for you. I can put you back to work in either Syracuse or Utica. Do you want to take it?
Is that good news?
Well, it was a job, so it was
Yeah.
considered good news.
Uh-huh.
And I said, let me just think about it. And Sue said, no way. We didn't move to Vermont for you to commute for a job in upstate New York. We either make a living here or we move. And with that, I said, okay, so I guess we're going to have to make a living here some way. So in 1975, in spring of 1975, we started GPI Construction and struggled to keep things going.
What does the GPI stand for?
Well, the reality of it was, when I first started the business with Susan, we had a partner. His name was Paganelli. So it was Greenbaum and Paganelli Interior Construction, because we were going to focus on commercial construction. About 3 months after forming the actual legal business, Gary said to me he didn't want to move to Vermont because he was also unemployed in Connecticut, thinking about the dream of moving to Vermont. He elected to bail out because his wife didn't want to live in the boonies, and we lived 3 miles away from town at that time, and that was considered like, why do you live so far out of town? We decided to split, so we kept the name because it was why change all the paperwork?
Yeah.
Turned around, and years later, my attorney at that time was Doug Wilson, said, well, let's figure it out, and he came up with the name Greenbaum's Property Improvement Construction Company. So that's where the GPI came from, from an initial dream that kind of split, and that partner went their way, and we elected to stay in the business for about an additional 26 years, and then we incorporated another partner in the business today who's president of the company, Joe Fortier and Alyssa Fortier. They're equal partners in our construction business and in our real estate too.
Well, I've always wondered what that is.
A lot of people do. Now that's secret's out.
That secret's out. We got that cleared up. So let's go back a little bit. I don't know about you and Sue, but when Jesse and I started, we each had, I think we each had $1,000 to our name because we had worked that summer, and you could make about $1,000 in a summer. You lived with your parents, and so you had no expenses, and you just banked everything you made. And that's about what we had when we started, $2,000 when we got married.
That's about right.
Yeah, that worked.
Yeah, it worked.
And we never considered ourselves poor. I never even thought about that I was poor. But yet, by standards, we were.
I would agree with that.
Yeah. And yet today, when you don't, when you don't have a certain income, and even though you're just starting out and you're really not worth paying too much to because you don't have any skills, people say you deserve more. There seems to be this environment that we live in that you need, you can't be poor. We have to subsidize you until you get there. If you ever get that thinking of that's what's going on?
Oh, I think it's absolutely what's going on. I remember it was in about 1954. My dad had started his own law business, and I remember hearing conversations about money. Don't remember a lot about it, but I also remember very distinctively having rationed powder milk that my dad would pick up someplace in the city, and I assume it was from, the Army Surplus Agency, and he would pick up powdered milk that my mom would take whole milk and mix with water so we could stretch the milk out. I remember getting huge blocks of American cheese, orange cheese. Mm-hmm. We had canned hams, and they were all in the drab olive green can.
So is this all government?
That was just government food. No, this was we had rations, you might say, of government food to help subsidize us, and I would assume my dad probably, because he didn't have the income and he needed some food to help us, could get whatever was available that particular time. There wasn't food stamps, there was none around that I knew of, and it was just, here it is, here's some extra cheese from the government, so we ate grilled cheese sandwiches and had lots of macaroni and cheese. When you talk about starting out, I remember Susan and I, we started out and we didn't think of ourselves as poor in any way because we had jobs, and we just didn't think of ourselves as having much income. It wasn't anything else other than you didn't have much income. And
But
as
you
we,
also knew that you just couldn't buy much, but you basically met your bills.
you met your bills, because if you didn't, you were
straight.
really in deep trouble.
Yeah.
And you met your bills, and you did what it took to make ends meet. And I know as we moved to Vermont, my dad made the comment, he says, "Are you actually crazy?" He says, "Number one, you're moving there, you don't have a job." I was a union carpenter carrying a full journeyman's book in New York City, and I left in 1970-ish, earning about $7 or $8 an hour as a journeyman.
Mm-hmm. That's pretty good then.
That was pretty good in 1970.
Mm-hmm.
And I moved to New England, where the rate was almost in half. In fact, it was about $3.60 an hour. And you worked a 40-hour week, where I was making about $7 an hour in New York, working a 35-hour week. But you did what it took to make a living. There were really no major construction company projects or jobs in the area, so I took the best that I could and took that first job at Smith College. To me, you just did what you had to do. I can't tell you how many times we didn't have what I'd consider really good food in the house. There were a lot of meals that were franks and beans and a lot of tuna casseroles, and we were usually almost dead broke when maybe you had a little windfall. I can remember one windfall that I did have, and we were dead broke at the time. As an apprentice in New York, we had to drive sometimes as much as an hour and a half to the job. And I was a scrounger, so every day at the end of the day, I would actually pick up copper wire and throw it in a paper bag and bring it home. And I had accumulated probably the equivalent of about 100 pounds of copper wire. And we moved it up here.
Mm-hmm.
And we had started the business, and things were really, really tight. And one day Sue said to me, well, what can we do? Well, we got that copper wire, and I think I remember getting about $20, which was in 1975 a lot of money. And we took the copper wire, and I cashed it in at that time to Brattleboro Salvage, which is now where Triple T is, when Benny owned it before Norm and Mary bought it. And you did what it took, and I had accumulated 100 pounds of junk copper wire. Boy, I was really happy I found that copper wire in the basement and cashed it in for what we got, because it put a lot of meals on the table for that period of time.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting how those things, it works out. And there are a lot of people today who are struggling.
Absolutely.
And are working really hard to make ends meet.
Yeah, a lot of people,
and
including, I think the majority of people that I know are working a lot harder today for less than they did 10 years ago, and I think there's been some statistics that have proven that too, based on the survey of incomes in the state of Vermont.
Yeah, well, just the inflationary. I mean, inflation supposedly is not a big deal right now, but they're not counting fuel and food in those figures,
Right. Yeah.
Which to me, those are the two biggest.
Mm-hmm.
So we all know that inflation has hit.
Oh yeah.
And when the dollar gets inflated and you're still making the same amount
that you were making in 2007 or 2005.
Yeah.
Or some people even less than what they were making in 2000. It's hard. Yeah.
Well, you're making the same dollar amount, but things cost
a lot more. Yeah.
It's as long as you can have that job, you're okay. But so let's talk. One of the things we're going to talk about is, what is a businessman when you see these things revolving around you? How do you evaluate all this stuff?
Well, I think the first thing that as a businessman you have to evaluate is if you still have the passion. Because I don't care if you don't have the passion for your business to put in a 12-hour, 14-hour day to make ends meet. Whatever happens around you, you're going to be worn out and you're going to give up. Mm-hmm. And that's what happens to a lot of businesses, either if the owners are not satisfied personally, not necessarily financially, but personally. So you really have to have the passion for your business. That's the most important thing. Then you start to look at all the things that are happening around you, and you try to tailor your business to keep those things below the radar screen. And what I mean by that is 3 years ago, we saw gasoline prices at over $4 or close to $4 a gallon. And I'm now on my second hybrid within my company. My first was a 2005, and I drove that for 5 or 6 years, 5 years, put 135,000 miles on it. And I now have my second hybrid, which is giving me close to 50 miles to the gallon. I had seen what gasoline did to our company, and I want to keep that below the radar screen, so I tried to be proactive and not let gas guzzlers consume my budget. So our company actually has a pretty economical fleet. You see some of our cars like an HHR, which gets about 28 miles to the gallon. You know, you see a Chrysler minivan that gets about 22 miles to the gallon, and you see a Toyota Prius that gets to 50. And we really look at how carefully we use that resource, which is the gasoline consumes our operating budget. So we really look at it carefully.
So do you have a Prius car that,
Yeah.
that you drive that to make bids or meet with customers?
Well, I put in
because
over
it doesn't
30.
hold much equipment.
Well, actually, it does if you think about it.
Does it?
Number one, for me personally, I've driven that car 31,000 miles this year. So that gives you an idea of how the business has changed. Years ago, if I worked in Bellows Falls, it seemed like it was a far trip. Now when I say I work in St. Albans, I leave the office at 5, I'm at the job site at 7:30, or actually St. Albans, I'm at the job site at 8 o'clock, meet my vendors, leave at 11, and I'm back at the office by 3.
So you've had to go further afield.
Absolutely, to keep your construction interests growing. Absolutely.
Because construction, what has happened to the construction market? How would you can compare that to in 2005 to now, or whatever?
Well,
the next 5 years.
Let's go back really
Okay.
to about 98. Back in 98, I was the clerk of the works and project manager for a large 24,000 square foot building here in the Brattleboro area. At that time, they were talking about having computers which were like Apples and CVAXs, and they wanted spreadsheets. And I remember the first meeting we went to, the owner's rep said, well, does anybody have, mailing addresses so we can maybe share some of this? Nobody had it. By 2001, I had 1 computer in the office. By 2011, we have 5 computers in the office. Okay? The industry has changed in that you never saw out-of-town contractors working in your territory because it was too hard to conduct business. So in 1990, very rarely did you see somebody from Burlington coming down here to build a 10,000 square foot building. It was usually a local contractor, and local meaning between here, Keene, or Greenfield, but not coming, 170 miles away. With computers, specifically emails, electronic cameras, digital printers, electronic transfer of documents. A lot of people won't even know where the project manager is sitting because they could be sitting in Burlington and doing $1 million job down here. So we've had to do the flip side of that, and we never went to St. Albans to do work for a bank because that bank had their own local vendor taking care of them. Well, today those banks in St. Albans and throughout the area have facility managers that work maybe in Albany. And that facility manager only cares about 2 things. Number 1, servicing the customer, which is the employee of the bank, and number 2, response time. So we've expanded our territory, you might say, by going out of the area, doing things that are computer orientated. So we have we can send electronic photos. We have the email capabilities, the BlackBerry capabilities, so that we can respond to facilities out of the area.
And all that technology has allowed you to really expand your region of reach.
Absolutely.
But it's expected now.
It's absolutely expected. It will be very difficult for a company, not a carpenter or not a house painter, but for a company of house painters or a company of electricians to build a business without geographically, conservatively driving over an hour in any one direction. So our company is licensed in Massachusetts, New Hampshire, and Vermont. We do not go into New York because the rules and regulations are actually even more burdening than in Vermont. So we just stay out of New York, period.
Mm-hmm. But what that also has done is increased your competition. It's put pressure on you to do that, because somebody from Burlington could be coming down here, or somebody from Manchester, New Hampshire even.
We see that all the time. So as an example, there are companies down in this area, we see them all over, doing work in our area that have Williston and have, Colchester on their side of their truck. At the same time, I had people today in Bonneville working. I have people working in Bennington at a big plaza today working, and yet we do have some jobs right here in town. But you have to be able to go where your work is, and you really can't pass those costs on to the customer.
Well, I'm just thinking this competition, then you have to work smarter if you're going to make the same amount of money.
You have to work a lot smarter, which goes back to what I was...
Do you feel pinched with this
process? You sure do. Which goes back to what I was saying in regards to, like, we work smarter. The guys that are commuting to Bennington are in a vehicle that gets about 24 miles to the gallon. Mm-hmm. We try to work smarter by piggybacking 2 service calls. So yesterday we were in White River Junction, and we were at one side of the street doing a job for one customer, and we were on the other side of the street doing a job for a totally different customer, but we carpooled in one vehicle, sharing the same resources, which is the time to get up there, the gas, and some of the equipment. Where years ago you'd just say, well, send 2 vehicles up there and just do it. No, you plan and you have to work smarter, absolutely.
So this is really this is where the rubber meets the road in the business world today. Yeah. Because you have to be able to have a competitive price. Yeah. And you
have to work smarter at all times. We just came off of an annual insurance audit, which now puts our workman's comp modification at a 0.82. That's meaning we're getting an 18% discount off the base rate. But more so on that, every 3 years, we use the same insurance agent, and that agent turns around every 3 years and takes all of our insurance needs and packages it and puts it out to bid for us with the major insurance companies. So, there are companies in Hartford, Connecticut, and there are companies over in Keene, and there are companies up in Maine that get to look at our business insurance package, and then they make a bid based on a forecast of volume. How many thousands of dollars we'll have in payroll, how many thousands of dollars we'll have in subcontractor volume, what our gross sales will be. They bid on that, and then they give us their rates, and we look at that with our local insurance agent, who does a great job of representing us, and try to find out which company will be best for us for that 3-year period. So that's working smarter. Just, look at all your resources and say, how can I bundle them together to get the maximum buying power so that the rubber meets the road, as you said, whether it's gasoline or insurance, you're trying to keep your costs down.
And you can just see that the insurance companies have done the same thing, I mean, in those different arenas.
I think all companies have done that in the arenas. There's been a fear of big box stores coming in and blowing the doors off of the local lumber yards. Well, I don't believe that fear is as big as it sounds. You know, do we buy stuff at a big box store? Yeah, usually, and it happens to be, generally speaking, the lost leader consumables, the dust masks, the roller covers, never the lumber, never the ceiling grid, because there's actually
Quality control.
quality control, because there is a double set of standards. You might think you're getting a yellow battery operated drill or a green and yellow tractor, but they're made with different components, so they're pretty smart about it.
Yeah.
You see it here with our local vendors that participate in True Value, and I don't mean to throw names out there, Ace Hardware. They're buying groups. So they're out there trying to pull together their best package to compete against the big box stores. And you might say we're out there as GPI Construction, Joe Fortier and I are out there trying to pull together our best package of pricing to give to our potential customers for repeat business. And that's what it takes.
Yeah. Well, it also sounds like it's even because of all this organization needed and so forth, you need more people specializing in these different aspects to help you work. But it would be harder to even really start out and be a solo operator nowadays. I mean, you're really limited on what you can do if you're just solo, it sounds.
I believe that the ability for a solo person to start a business and then nurture that so it grows is really hard today. I know that I started the business with a partner that lasted about 4 months, and a customer of mine said to me at that time, "You don't need a partner, just be in control and do it." And that's what we did. When you look at being a sole proprietor and a small business person versus a business that might have 5 or 7 or 10 employees, there's an awful lot on the line. You really may want to have somebody else share both the financial responsibilities to the lending institutions and also the mental responsibilities, because
Meeting payroll is a headache.
meeting payroll is a headache. Taking a vacation and prorating paychecks so that you can enjoy yourself for 2 weeks is a major headache. And at the same time, worrying about who's watching the store while you're on that 2-week vacation or 1-week vacation is also a major headache. So I would have a tendency to say that if you really want to develop a business, you should find someone who you're willing to be glued to the hip with, that has the same passion as you do, and make sure both of you share at least 51% of all the job responsibilities every day, because that's how you can develop your business, grow, and at the same time have a little peace of mind. So if you do take time off, or if you're got a bad case of the flu for a week, you're not worried about who's minding the store.
Yeah. On that note, we're going to have to end this session. We're going to ask you to stick around for another session because we want to talk some more. But we thank you for watching. You've been watching Neighbor to Neighbor. My name is Lynn Coram, and I've been here with Art Greenbaum from GPI Construction. And we'll see you on our next show. Thanks for watching.